Not only were people arrested in the communal housing, but people were arrested on bicycles. For instance, there's a group called the Flying Rutabaga Circus, and I think 7 of their members were arrested for bicycling without a license. It just so happens that there's no such statute covering such a charge, and in effect they were really arrested for having the nerve to speak out on an issue that involves all of us, which is the quality of the food that is going to be shared on this planet.
Here at camp, it was a little bit more public of a space. There's a lot more neighbors walking around, like our neighbors were watching the whole thing happen and asking the police what they were doing here. We had some people show up with cameras who kind of knew their rights. So because of my insistence on my rights, because of the legal observers that were watching it, I feel like they had to be more careful. They had to go by the book. They had to actually get a search warrant. I mean, I could definitely see, like, in the space, when the spaces that I could watch them searching were not thoroughly ransacked. I mean, they were trashed, but not just completely disrespected.
Yeah, and it definitely was a feeling of violation that this happened without, with a very shabby pretext, the pretext of looking for elements of crime that could be used in a protest situation. And they came out with all this paraphernalia, which couldn't even be possibly construed as such.
Pretext is one of those words that, while it may be semantically accurate, I think that it's got a little bit of a negative connotation. I think you could use the word reason just as well. This was the reason that the police went in there.
So we came inside, and in the front window we had our work permits, and when we got back they had condemned written across them and pasted back or taped back up in the window or whatever. My room and Molly's rooms were where a lot of damage was done. It was heartbreaking to come back in here. Things were strewn everywhere. I had art supplies that were turned upside down, and all of my oil paints were thrown all over the ground and my desk. Everything had been swept off my desk and onto the floor over in the corner, and the shelves had been taken apart, and everything on the shelves was on the floor, and the red cabinet that's covered in pictures was dumped out and had like underwear and socks. The cabinet was still on the bed, and I'm pretty sure, no, I'm positive the cops urinated on my clothes.
After the raids of May 16th, I personally ended up with kind of the feeling that what we needed to do was to go through all avenues to challenge the events, to challenge the behaviors of the police, which included going to internal affairs and asking them to do an investigation. A lot of people were extremely skeptical of this.
Some of the people that live at camp are involved with organizing for a police oversight board in St. Louis, because there is before this happened, there is widespread understanding that the police oversight process was fatally flawed.
But nonetheless, we set up a date with our lawyer and people from internal affairs and a bunch of people that wanted to file complaints to get together and have these interviews.
The police did accommodate us and agreed, while they wouldn't meet at the Bolo Zone or any of the residences of the protesters, they did agree to meet at my office.
And we dropped off complaint forms with them, multiple complaint forms. I mean, I'm sure they probably heard from 30 people, complaining about what happened.
And in September, there's this article in the paper where Internal Affairs is quoted as saying that that activists, the people involved with it, were never helpful, never wanted to meet with Internal Affairs, never filed complaints, and just really were trying to paint us as these people that were just absolutely not going to work with the system.
Discussing the internal affairs investigation of the WAF protest last May is somewhat difficult in the sense that St. Louis police refused to release any files of their internal investigation into the matter. We'd first requested those files at the Riverfront Times in June, I believe, shortly thereafter, after the raids. Received a reply from the police department saying even though the investigation wasn't complete yet, they would not give us the files. We did a story where we had requested copies of all internal affairs files from the St. Louis Police Department on officers who were suspected of crimes. By way of background, the department does release generic statistics on how many cases they handle each year. And during the time frame covered by our request, this would have been, again, April 1st, 1997 to, I think, mid-August of 2003 when we made the request. We were expecting to get a fair number of files, given that the police department handled 445 physical abuse allegations alone during that time period. We received 68 pages of documents. Each page was a heavily redacted complaint summary. The names of officers were blacked out, their badge numbers were blacked out. Any way to contact, the complainant's name remained, but any way to contact them had been blacked out. We had some back and forth on that with the police, citing a 2001 state Supreme Court ruling which stated that internal affairs files are public records if officers are accused of criminal conduct, suspected of criminal conduct. Nobody has to actually even file a complaint saying, I believe Officer Brown broke the law. The files become public if police on their own develop any information to believe that a crime may have occurred. Their response was that urinating on property and slashing bicycle tires, that doesn't constitute a crime within the city limits of St. Louis. Rather, it's a civil matter, at least in the eyes of the police. Clearly, it's a crime. Vandalism is a crime. It's punishable by time in jail. It's punishable by fines. And so the police department, in denying access to this record, is giving itself authority, which I think it doesn't have.
Well, we just got out of court and we finally had our trial for the charges of occupying a condemned building.